What's happening, fantasy football? It's your boy Hot Soup, and I'm coming to you with our episode of Overachievers for Week 11. That's right, man. We had some great football going on in Week 11. I'm talking about we had some highs and we had some lows. We're going to go over the highs right now. For those of you who had the number one fantasy score, congratulations. He popped me in a league, and I popped two people in a league with him. Was a great pickup for me, Taysom Hill. That's right. Put an M on his name, man. Taysom Hill. Give me some Taysom. 206 total yards. This man was throwing the ball, running the ball, and catching the ball. Touches out of this world. 206 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. This man went off for 38.52 fantasy points, the highest fantasy score in week 11. He's going to be the hottest thing on the waiver wire. Go get him if you have tight end issues. If you don't have tight end issues, I would still go get him. He was the number one quarterback / tight end in week 11. Number 2 on our overachiever list. No one thought that Jarrod Goff against Jacksonville would throw for 433 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's 34.58 points. Number 2 overall fantasy scoring quarterback. And the overall, if you want to say the number 1 quarterback, because Taysom Hill is not a QB. However, he's listed as a QB, so we had to put him there. It is what it is. Jarrod Goff versus Jacksonville, 34.58 points. Jarrod Goff was distributing the ball to all receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown damn near had a career day. Williams got off. David Montgomery and Gibbs both were in the top 10 in fantasy scoring for running backs. Jacksonville defense, sweet. If you have players going against Jacksonville, get them in your lineups in week 12. That would be the smart thing to do. Our number 1 running back for week 11, Saquon Barkley. That's right. What? Saquon goes off for 198 yards and 2 TDs. 32.8 fantasy points against Washington. He was the number 1 running back in fantasy scoring in week 11. Great job, Saquon, man. Keep doing your thing. Our second running back was Breece Hall. Breece Hall, 121 yards, 2 TDs, had 27.6 fantasy points against Indianapolis. Breece Hall finally had himself a day. Breece Hall was the number 2 running back in fantasy scoring with those 2 touchdowns. Our number 3 player, David Montgomery. Yeah, we talked about him earlier. David Montgomery, 95 yards and 2 tutties, good for 23 points, was number 3 in fantasy scoring for running backs. Beat up on Jacksonville. Jacksonville's defense, trash. Amon-Ra St. Brown, our first receiver, the number 1 receiver in fantasy scoring this week, with 157 yards and 2 tutties. 33.2 fantasy points against Jacksonville. That Jacksonville defense is ringing in my ear right now. I'm looking for him this week in all my fantasy leagues. And if I got a player going against Jacksonville's defense, I'm starting them. Yeah. Our number 4 overall receiver in fantasy scoring. This guy needs a head nod or two. Jerry Jeudy, 142 yards and a touchdown, 23.2 fantasy points. That was his best game this year. However, look at the trend. Since Jameis Winston has been throwing this guy the ball, he's putting up numbers consistently. He needs to be top on your list on your waiver wire pickups. Jeudy, you heard it from the soup. Our number 3 overall receiver this week, T. Higgins, had himself a day. Los Angeles Chargers defense is tough. T. Higgins is a big play receiver. 148 yards, 1 TD, 25.3 fantasy points, ended up number 3 overall in fantasy scoring. And our first tight end, and I stung my boy with this one. He is sick. My boy, Big Clint up in Chicago, man. I started Jonnu Smith on him this week. Ooh, he is sick right now. Yeah, man. Big cheese, baby. You coming out big cheese, boy. I can't wait for you to see this show, man, because you's a whole sucker. Yeah. My boy Jonnu Smith this week goes off for 101 yards, 2 TDs, 25.1 fantasy points against Las Vegas. The number 2 fantasy scorer as a tight end. He would be number 1. However, Taysom Hill is a quarterback. He's a receiver. He's a tight end. Shit. Might put him in a defensive player. He'll probably have a sack or two. Yeah. And our number 3 tight end on the week was Brock Bowers. This man had 14 touches, 126 yards and a touchdown, 24.8 fantasy points versus Miami. He was the only thing that Las Vegas had this week. We're going to go over our underachievers in week 11. And woo, did we have some big names that was womp, 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 Kirk Cousins. Oh, and I had him on my top 5 sits last week. What? Kirk Cousins, 173 yards, 1 interception, 5.92 fantasy points. I told you so. Denver's defense is real. And Kirk Cousins, he just ain't the answer, man. He was doing his thing against weak defenses. He had one huge game where he threw for 500. But there's way too many games this guy's scoring under 15 points. I'm not faithful to him. I sold him in a league. Yeah. Got Alvin Kamara. I told y'all about that trade last week. Yeah, man. I ain't want Kirk Cousins. I ain't want him. Kirk Cousins, the number 26 overall scoring quarterback in week 11. He had a ugly day. Our number 2 quarterback on our underachiever list, and he burnt me. He burnt me on my parlays. He burnt me. He just was not the guy that we expected him to be in week 11, Russell Wilson. Oh, man. What? Russell Wilson, 205 yards, 1 pick, no tuds versus Baltimore. Baltimore's been giving up touchdowns to every quarterback this year. And you can't do nothing, Russ? Man, listen. If it wasn't for Boswell, they would have lost that game. Let me tell y'all something. Russell Wilson, 7.3 fantasy points, ends up number 25 overall quarterback. Man, talking about let Russ cook. Russ got shook. And our first running back on our underachievers, and I knew this was going to happen versus Minnesota's stout defense versus the run, Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard, 29 yards. That's it. No TDs, no fumbles, no nothing. Just a pedestrian. 29 yards. 3.9 fantasy points, ended up number 36 overall in fantasy scoring. Tony Pollard will have better days, but matchups is key for his success. Aaron Jones is our next pick. Ended up number 34 overall in fantasy scoring with 4.8 fantasy points. That man had 43 yards. I just knew Aaron Jones was going to do something versus Tennessee. Tennessee said, no, sir, Mr. Aaron. No, no, no. 43 yards from Aaron Jones. That's all you could give me? In a half point PPR, you get me 4.8 points. That means you got 1 reception. Man, you suck this week, Aaron Jones. And I know your managers is cussing you out right now. Our next player that I also had on my top 5 start list who flopped, Flopperooski, Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb versus New Orleans was supposed to go ham. Nick Chubb had 11 touches and 50 yards, 5 fantasy points. Nick Chubb stunk up the place, man. Number 32 overall in fantasy scoring. Made me look like a whole damn sucker this week. Man, it's all good. Nick Chubb should have better days in the near future. Our next player is a receiver. He had a abysmal week in week 11 was Terry McLaurin. That's right, man. Ooh, the McLaren engine and transmission dropped in the middle of the damn street. Terry McLaurin got locked down in Philly. 1.5 fantasy points. Man had 10 yards. When I say he was on lock, he was on lock. Number 27 over there. Shots out. I see you, boy. Our next receiver flopped. I mean, all the big wigs on ESPN was talking about start Darnell Mooney. Start him, start him, start him versus Denver, start him versus Denver. Man, y'all must be crazy. I told y'all what was going to happen with Kirk Cousins. Y'all should have listened to the soup. I got the recipe and the ingredients. All you got to do is follow. Listen, 27 yards, 3.7 fantasy points, ended up number 64 overall. Kirk Cousins made all his offense look like straight trash. Our next receiver, and this one burnt me bad, man. Burnt me in 2 leagues this week. I got him in about 7. Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, 18 yards. That's it. Against Indianapolis, Aaron Rodgers looking old as dirt. Can't get out the pocket. Getting sacked. Man, you know what? Next time Aaron Rodgers play, I'm picking that defense because Aaron Rodgers getting sacked 6, 7 times a game. Man, give me the defense playing against A-Rod. Yeah, I said it. A-Rod, man, where you at? Garrett Wilson, number 61 overall receiver. Garrett? Man, it's rough out here, man. You don't know what it's going to be out here in the fantasy world. Week in and week out, the landscape changes. Next up, Travis Kelce. Ooh, I'm glad I ain't got no stock in him. Travis Kelce versus Buffalo, a must-win game to stay undefeated, and you put up 11 yards. Ooh, his fantasy managers is steaming. And I'm over here like Willie Beeman. Yeah, man, I was playing against Travis Kelce in like 5 leagues, along with a couple of leagues that I made some money in, man, because y'all know I got a sports gambling problem. Yeah, I said it, man. Thank you for starting Travis Kelce in week 11. Number 37 overall tight end versus Buffalo. Our worst tight end performer of week 11, Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft's about to get dropped by me. I'm dropping his ass. Listen, you on my team and you put up no targets and no catches. Let me tell you something, man. You done. I'm not giving you a second chance. I'm trying to get Taysom Hill, man. It is what it is. Tucker Kraft, 0 catches, 0 targets, 0 points. Just straight trash. What? Tucker Kraft, 0 catches, 0 points. What? Yeah, man. Your ass is heading to the waivers. Man, it's your boy Hot Soup. Those are your underachievers for week 11. Go check us out for our overachievers in week 11. It's your boy Hot Soupy, and I'm out. Ooh.